Grandfather made us bleed on the dock every Sunday since I turned 10. Now my mother wants me to come back and act like it was all just a family tradition. They said it was a birthday gift. I turned 10 that morning. Woke up to the sound of gulls shrieking over the river and the sharp slap of water against wood. My name's Noah. I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, and that day was supposed to be the start of everything good. Instead, it was the day everything changed. Dad didn't say happy birthday. He just nodded at me over burnt coffee and told me to get my shoes on. We're late, he muttered. Your grandfather don't wait. I'd heard whispers about the Sunday gatherings. The dock. The boys. The fights. I just never thought they'd let me in. The fishing dock was gray and rotten, slick with algae and grease. We drove through silence, the way we always did when Dad was mad or scared. Couldn't tell which it was that morning. Probably both. When we pulled up, I saw them, my uncles, cousins, even my older brother Calvin, standing in a circle at the edge of the dock. Past them, the river curled like a dying thing, brown and sour-smelling, with bits of garbage drifting on the current. The air stank of diesel, wetwood, and sweat. Strip him down, one of the uncles called. His voice cracked like a whip. Dad didn't hesitate. He knelt and tugged at my shirt. It's tradition, he said quietly, I's not meeting mine. Your trial. They'd drawn a circle in white chalk, maybe 4 feet wide, on the slick wood boards. That was the ring. My cousin Rafe stood in it already, bare-chested, shivering. We were the same age, same grade. He looked just as scared as I felt. Grandfather stepped forward then. His face was red and leathery, covered in wind-cut lines, like old rope. He smelled like salt and cigarettes. People said he once captained a deep-sea boat and lost half his crew to a typhoon in the 70s. Nobody ever asked how. Nobody dared. Hunger is the ocean, he growled, starting the chant. The others picked it up in rhythm, their voices low and steady. Blood is the sail. Hunger is the ocean. Blood is the sail. I didn't understand what it meant, not then. But I heard it in my bones. Grandfather looked at me. Noah. First blood eats first. You understand. I nodded. I didn't, but I nodded. Then strike. I stared at Rafe, his lip trembling, fist raised the way we'd seen in movies. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to turn, run back to the truck, back home. But they were watching. All of them. My dad. My grandfather. My brother. So I lunged. It wasn't even a punch, really. More like a shove with my fist. I grazed Rafe's nose, and it bled, thin red dripping down to his upper lip. He winced, stumbled back, and that was it. The ring erupted in cheers. My grandfather nodded, satisfied. Rafe wiped at the blood, crying silently. They gave me a bowl of fish stew. It was warm, salty, oily. I ate it fast, my hands shaking. Rafe sat on the side, alone, with a dry saltine cracker and a cup of water. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody looked at him. That was the rule. You bleed, you eat. You lose, you starve. I didn't know it then, but that moment would define the rest of my life. Every Sunday, every scar, every silence. That was how boys became men in my family. We earned our place one drop of blood at a time. By the time I was 15, I had bled more Sundays than I could count. Sometimes I won. More often, I didn't. My nose broke twice. A rib once. One of my cousins, Jasper, lost part of a tooth and never got it fixed. It was just how it was. You fought. You ate. You didn't. You went hungry. But that didn't mean we liked it. We just didn't know there was another way. Until sophomore year, when Mr. Keeling, our drama teacher, passed out little blood capsules for our spring play. We were doing some cheesy pirate thing. The kind with foam swords and paper hats. He handed each of us a plastic bag of tiny pouches. Stage blood, he explained. Realistic enough to freak out your grandma. Don't eat it. I remember standing there, holding the pouch, feeling it squish between my fingers. It looked like the real thing. Dark, syrupy. I blinked once, and the idea just bloomed. That night, I slipped 2 extra packets from the prop drawer and took them home. Hid them behind a loose tile under the sink. I didn't say a word to anyone. Over the next few weeks, I stole more. Tested them. Learned the feel, the smell, the perfect squeeze. I'd watch fights on TV, mimicking the timing. Fake a stumble, fake a fall, pop a packet with a knuckle to the nose, bam. Blood. I told Rafe first. It felt right. Maybe because I still owed him. He never blamed me for that first Sunday, but I remembered the look in his eyes. You in? I asked him one night after school. We were behind the 7-Eleven, pretending to smoke candy cigarettes. He hesitated. If they find out. They won't, I said. Not if we're smart. And we were. Smarter than they gave us credit for. The first Sunday we tried it, it was Rafe's turn to fight Miguel, one of the youngest. They danced around the ring, threw a few weak jabs, then Miguel gave the signal, hands up, chin tucked, leaned forward. Rafe swiped, Miguel popped the packet against his cheek. Blood sprayed onto the dock. Everyone cheered. Nobody checked for bruises. That was the start of it. Within a month, we had a rotation. Me, Rafe, Miguel, Jasper, and even Darius, who barely spoke above a whisper. We shared packets, passed them in folded notes and sandwich bags. Every Sunday, someone different won. Someone different bled. And we all got to eat. For 3 months, we lived like ghosts in plain sight. Actors instead of warriors. None of the adults suspected a thing. They were too busy singing their twisted shanties. Blood is the sail, they sang. Strength is the storm. We kept our heads down. Kept our bruises fake and our smiles quiet. It was working until one Sunday, Grandfather stepped forward after a match and squinted at Calvin. My cousin stood proud, blood still on his lip. But his face? No swelling. No cuts. Not even a scratch. Grandfather said nothing. Just stared. And right then, I knew. He didn't believe it. The crackdown started the next Sunday. We showed up like always, pretending nothing was different. But things were different. Grandfather was already there, standing stiff near the edge of the dock with his arms crossed and a thermos of black coffee in his hand. Uncles flanked him like security guards. Noah, one of them barked. Empty your pockets. I blinked. What? You deaf? He snapped his fingers and 2 more uncles came up behind me. I looked at Dad, who was off to the side by the cooler. He didn't say a word. Just took a sip from his beer can and looked away. They patted me down. Shirt, waistband, even my socks. Nothing on me, thank God. I had gotten paranoid and stashed everything back at home, just in case. But Miguel wasn't so lucky. I didn't know until I heard the shout. What the hell is this? Uncle Grant yelled, holding up a bloody Ziploc bag. Inside it, one of the stage packets floated like a dark jellyfish. Miguel's face drained of color. He didn't speak, just lowered his eyes. Whose idea was this? Grandfather's voice was low but sharp. Who's been faking it? Silence. No one moved. I asked a question, he said louder. If none of you got the balls to own it, then I'll make an example. That's when they dragged Miguel into the ring. At first, we thought it was just a scare. A slap on the wrist, maybe a chore punishment. But then Rafe whispered, they're calling in Calvin. Calvin was 18 now. Over 6 feet, all bone and muscle, shaved head and eyes like dead glass. He hadn't lost a fight since he was 12. But Grandfather didn't call just Calvin. He called Jasper too. And Darius. 3 of them, all older. All bigger. And Miguel? He was 14, barely 130 soaking wet. Survivor's trial, Grandfather declared. Real this time. We screamed. We begged. I stepped forward, heart thudding. It was my fault, I said quickly. I made him do it. Punish me. But Grandfather waved me off. You've always been mouthy. Sit down. They didn't even let Miguel put his hands up. The 3 circled him, slow at first, then fast. Calvin swung first, a body shot that folded Miguel in half. Jasper followed with a knee to the ribs. Darius kicked out his legs. It wasn't a fight. It was a punishment. By the time they were done, Miguel couldn't move. His nose was broken. One arm hung limp, like it had been yanked from the socket. He groaned once, then passed out. Someone drove him to the ER that night, but they told the nurses he fell off a skateboard. We all knew that wasn't the truth. Next morning, Grandfather called a family meeting. The grown-ups sat around the living room like it was church. Me and the other cousins stood in the back. From now on, he said, we check everything. Before fights. After fights. Every pocket. Every inch. He wasn't lying. The next Sunday, they stripped us down to our underwear before the ring. Checked our mouths, even our socks. They stood inside the chalk circle now, not just around it. Watching. Breathing down our necks. That night, Dad came into my room. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed like he used to when I was little. You better not be involved, he said quietly. Next time they catch someone, it's not going to be just a beating. I stared at him. I'm serious, he said. You'll be the next one in the hospital. I nodded. Said nothing. But in my head, something shifted. If fear wasn't working anymore, maybe fire would. We ran the night after Calvin broke Miguel's arm. I'd had enough. Of the silence. Of the threats. Of watching kids get stomped half to death while grown men stood around like they were coaching a football game. And I wasn't the only one. Rafe was already packing when I slipped into his garage with my backpack. Jasper came 15 minutes later. Then Darius. We left notes that said nothing, just enough to keep our parents from panicking right away. Gone for a walk, or at a friend's. Lies we hoped would buy us time. It didn't. Within an hour, they were calling our phones. By hour 2, we were hiding in the back of a Hardee's bathroom, eating ketchup packets and splitting a half-warm biscuit Jasper had stolen off a tray. I remember the way Rafe looked, curled up near the mop bucket. You think they're gonna come here? No, I said, but I didn't believe it. We tried the guidance counselor next. She listened for 5 minutes before her smile stiffened, and she told us to wait while she got someone to help. We were halfway down the hall when we saw the front office calling our parents. Darius bolted. The rest of us followed. We called the drama teacher, the one who gave us the fake blood. I figured if anyone would understand, it'd be her. She picked up fast. Her voice shook. Oh, God, Noah, she said. Where are you? Downtown, I told her. By the train tracks. Can we come to your place? There was a pause. Then she said, I'm sorry, sweetie. I had to call them. They said it was a family situation. I didn't know what else to do. She hung up before I could respond. 10 minutes later, a black Ford with tinted windows rolled past the station bench we were sitting on. I recognized the driver. One of grandfather's friends. The kind who showed up at barbecues but never talked. Just watched. We ran again. Jasper fell trying to climb a chain-link fence behind the old library. Landed bad on his ankle. He screamed once and bit down on his hoodie. We carried him as far as the edge of the park before he collapsed. That's when we knew we were out of time. That night, I tried the one thing I hadn't yet. I walked into the police station on 3rd Street, still sweating, backpack slung over my shoulder, and asked to report abuse. The cop behind the glass looked up like I'd interrupted his dinner. Abuse by who? My family, I said. My grandfather. They're making us fight. Kids. Like bare knuckle. I've got pictures, bruises, blood, broken bones. He blinked. Is this a school prank or something? It's real. He leaned back, folding his arms. Son, do your parents know where you are? I'm trying to tell you they're the reason I'm here. The man sighed. Stood up. Disappeared into the back for a few minutes. When he returned, my dad was with him. He didn't speak. Just looked at me like I'd kicked a puppy in front of a priest. The cop patted me on the back. Family stuff's complicated, he said. Y'all just need to work it out at home. On the drive back, Dad didn't yell. He didn't even turn the radio on. He just said, You really thought you could get away? That's when it clicked. It wasn't just the dock. It was everywhere. The school. The cops. The neighbors who smiled too wide and locked their doors after dark. The adults who looked away. Grandfather didn't just run the fights. He ran everything. After the police sent me home, the punishment wasn't fists. It was silence. I thought they'd scream, beat me, maybe drag me to the dock and make me bleed. But that wasn't the plan. Grandfather was smarter than that. He didn't need bruises to break you. Just time and precision. First came the therapist. They told me her name was Dr. Karen Mollis. She had kind eyes and a cozy office with beach prints on the wall and a bowl of peppermints by the door. I was supposed to talk. About my anger, my paranoia, my wild stories. She asked soft questions, took softer notes, and always smiled like I was a troubled child who'd seen too many movies. Let's talk about these rituals, she said once. Where do you think those ideas came from? They're not ideas, I said. She nodded slowly. But no one else remembers them the way you do. That was the trick. No outright denial, just little cracks in the foundation of my memory. A gentle shove here, a raised eyebrow there. I started to question myself. What if I had made it up? What if I was exaggerating? Then came the journal. I'd been keeping notes, photos, drawings, maps of the dock layout, fake fight rotation schedules. I hid it under the lining of my backpack. But someone found it. Maybe Dad. Maybe Calvin. Either way, it ended up in the hands of the school. The principal called me into his office with the guidance counselor sitting stiff beside him. Is this yours? He asked, holding up the blue spiral notebook. I nodded. He flipped to a page with a drawing of the dock ring. Noah, this reads like a screenplay. A disturbing one. Are you trying to scare people? It's not a story, I told him. It's evidence. He exchanged a look with the counselor, like they were watching a kid slip off the deep end. I was suspended for 3 days. Not for fighting. For fabricated threats. After that, my friends stopped calling. Even the ones who used to pass me extra crackers at lunch avoided eye contact in the halls. I heard whispers, delusional, messed up, crazy. It didn't matter that I had proof. The adults had made up their minds, and the kids followed. The house changed too. Photos disappeared. Pictures of me smiling at family reunions, gone. One day, I noticed my name scratched off a trophy I'd won for a middle school essay contest. When I asked Mom, she just blinked and said, that was Calvin's award, wasn't it? It wasn't. But the way she said it, soft, confused, it made me question myself again. The mothers cried more. Not openly, but in corners, behind locked bathroom doors. You'd hear the muffled sobs through the vents. Then they'd come out with red eyes and kiss their sons on the head like nothing was wrong. They never said a word. Because speaking meant losing everything. A roof, a name, a family line. Rafe barely looked at me anymore. Darius went quiet. Jasper never came around after his fall. But I wasn't done. If they were going to erase me, I'd become a ghost they couldn't bury. I started rebuilding quietly, methodically. A burner phone in the floor vent. USBs taped to the underside of benches at the skate park. A locked locker at the public library. Every night, after pretending to sleep, I'd catalog new entries. Fight records. Photos of healing bruises. Video clips of Sunday gatherings shot through cracked blinds. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I wasn't crazy. And one day, someone would believe me. Everything I did after that had to feel normal. I learned how to nod when they wanted me to nod, how to flinch on cue when a punch connected. I became a background player in my own life, watching, listening, cataloging. That's how survival worked now. You play the part. You wait. You gather. I started using old library computers to upload short clips. I'd record shaky audio on a broken MP3 player and title the files things like Science Homework 5 or Family Barbecue 3, so no one looked twice. My documents were encrypted and buried in fake folders, recipes, comic scans, meme dumps, all backed up on flash drives hidden in the ceiling panels of the library bathroom, inside the hollow leg of a broken chair, and beneath a rotted step on the dock itself. It wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about history, evidence, the kind no one could rewrite. Some cousins returned to the rituals. I didn't blame them. They were starving, terrified. After Miguel got hospitalized, kids started falling back in line. Smiles tight. Fists clenched. But I saw it in their eyes, something had shifted. Still, some stayed with me. Not many. Just enough. Miguel came back once his cast was off. He didn't fight anymore. His arm was never quite right. But he ran interference. Distraction. Alibis. He passed notes when phones were checked. Logged timestamps when I couldn't. Then there was Miguel's little brother, Luis. Only 9, sharp as glass. He never said a word around the adults, but he saw everything. He started drawing in a thick composition notebook, crude crayon sketches of the dock, the fights, even grandfather's belt slung over a rusted nail. I scanned every page at the public library and labeled them art homework. I was forced to become a referee. That was grandfather's idea. Said it was time I gave back to the tradition. I think he wanted to humiliate me, watch me sit and pretend the rules mattered as my friends clawed at each other for soup. I sat on the edge of the chalk ring every Sunday with a clipboard and stopwatch, pretending to care about fairness. Inside, I was screaming. There were moments that still haunt me, like when I watched a 6-year-old throw himself forward so he could bleed first and win a slice of cornbread. Or when Jasper came back one Sunday, limping, bruised, and silent. I tried to catch his eye, but he stared through me like I wasn't there. My father slipped me $20 once in the garage, behind the water heater. I've been stashing a little each week, he said without looking at me. When you're 18, you leave. Understand? I nodded. Didn't speak. He pressed the money into my hand, like it burned. Keep your head down. And then he walked away. That's when I realized he knew. Maybe he'd always known. Maybe all the fathers had. But they'd rather see their sons fight than admit they were part of something sick. Grandfather doubled down. Fights every Sunday weren't enough. He rearranged schedules so cousins from out of town had to participate. He called teachers, asked questions, pressured coaches to toughen the boys up. He was choking out the last bits of protection we had. No more school clubs, no more after-church lunches, no more theater rehearsals. He was rebuilding the cage. But I was building too. Each Sunday, each fight, I logged everything. Blood patterns, attendance, who cheered, who flinched. I saved it all. Printed hard copies, scanned backups, labeled everything like a case file. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But one day, someone was going to burn this whole thing down. And when they did, I wanted them to find the truth waiting. 6 weeks before my 18th birthday, grandfather made the announcement like he was planning a barbecue. We'll have a big send-off, he said, stirring his coffee like it was any other Sunday. One last fight for Noah. Full attendance. Everyone watches. People nodded like it made sense. Like it was a graduation ceremony. I didn't speak. I just looked down at my stew and wondered if my hands would still be shaking when the time came. The opponent was chosen before I could even guess. Calvin. My first opponent. My older cousin. Now almost 20, fully indoctrinated, and probably dreaming about how hard he'd make me bleed. He didn't smile when grandfather named him. Just nodded, like he'd been expecting it. The news spread fast. By Monday, even teachers were making jokes. Big day coming up. Huh? One of them asked me as I walked past. Don't go too easy on your cousin. I gave a fake laugh. In private, the allies I had left started to vanish. Rafe stopped returning my notes. Miguel's mom transferred him and Luis to a different school district for safety. I didn't blame her. She'd seen enough to know this wasn't going to end clean. I tried to focus on logistics. The evidence drives were hidden in 8 separate locations now, some under benches, others inside hollowed-out books at thrift stores. I had 2 full copies stashed in safety deposit boxes under fake names. Another set buried in a fireproof box beneath the floorboards of an abandoned bait shack upriver. I was ready for exposure, but I wasn't ready to stand in that ring again. The Sunday finally came. The dock was packed, more people than I'd ever seen at a fight. Cousins from other states. Women who normally stayed home. Even the quiet uncles who usually stood in the background were there, lined up like church ushers. They chalked the ring darker this time. Fresh. Crisp. Thick enough to trap you in it with your own fear. Calvin stepped in wearing a tank top and old jeans, his knuckles already taped. I stepped in wearing a plain shirt and the same boots I'd worn at 10. Grandfather raised his arms. This is the final trial of the boy Noah. Today he becomes a man, win or lose, blood or bone. The chant started slowly. Hunger is the ocean. Blood is the sail. I didn't move. Calvin smirked. You gonna cry or swing? I didn't answer. He lunged at me, but I sidestepped. Not fast, just enough to make it clear I wasn't participating. The crowd went quiet. Grandfather narrowed his eyes. Strike, Noah. No. Whispers rippled. Calvin lunged again, this time grabbing at my shirt. I stepped back. Calm. Measured. I refused to raise my fists. The air shifted. Something was cracking under the surface. And then, it happened. Calvin slipped. His foot caught on a puddle of river water near the chalk line, and he went down hard. Chin smacked the dock. His hand curled under him. Blood. Not much, but enough. A red smear across the wood. A collective gasp. Someone dropped a plastic cup. The chanting died mid-breath. Grandfather looked down at the blood like it had betrayed him. Get up, he barked. But Calvin didn't. He just rolled onto his back, blinking. Confused. The rule had always been simple. First blood wins. But now? Now it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a loophole. I turned to the crowd. Said nothing. Just looked them all in the eyes. The ritual had played out. The rule had been followed. But no one cheered. Because the performance was over. And the spell was broken. Grandfather didn't say a word as the crowd drifted off that day. Just stood there with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, watching Calvin get help to his feet like the blood didn't matter. Like it hadn't happened. But it had. The ritual was fulfilled. The crowd saw it. And even if no one spoke about it, something in the air had changed. That night, Grandfather called a family discussion, which meant everyone stood in the living room while he paced. He didn't mention the fall. Didn't acknowledge the loophole. Instead, he stared straight at me and said, if you think this was a clever little trick, think again. The next morning, my things were on the dock. Not packed. Not folded. Just dumped in a pile outside the fishing shed, sweatshirts, socks, a few notebooks, my cracked phone, and a raincoat with a hole in the side. A note pinned to my backpack. If you want to live like an outsider, then live like one. That shed became home. No insulation. No lock. The walls smelled like fish rot and mold, and the roof leaked every time the wind shifted. I slept on an old tarp. Ate what I could steal or what Miguel managed to sneak from his church potlucks. School didn't help. The counselor stopped calling me in. The teachers stopped asking questions. Whatever version of the story they'd been given, unstable, rebellious, violent, it was enough to make them avoid eye contact in the halls. The rest of the students followed. I became invisible. But invisibility had its advantages. It gave me time. Miguel still helped. Every Thursday, he dropped off a roll of crackers and an empty paint can behind the old recycling shed. Some weeks, he included Polaroids, blurry images of the fights, or notes copied from his cousin's journal entries. Luis kept drawing. He started hiding the sketches inside library books I'd planted with code words written in the margins. I'd pick one up, scan it, and leave a piece of candy or a pencil as thanks. The resistance was small. Mostly whispers. But it was growing. The mothers were the first to crack. Not all of them, but some. One week, Darius was missing from the ring. The next, his mom had him signed up for piano lessons every Sunday morning, non-negotiable. Another cousin got sick every weekend. Then baptism classes. Then soccer tryouts. They never said it aloud. But they knew. And this was the only rebellion they could manage. Distraction. Protection in disguise. But the machine didn't stop. Jasper's limp got worse. His right eye twitched every time someone raised their hand near him. He hadn't spoken to me in weeks. I heard from someone that he'd stopped eating after one of the uncles tested his loyalty with a pocket knife. And Darius? Gone. No one explained it. One day he was there. The next, vanished. Teachers wouldn't say if he'd transferred. His mother stopped showing up at church. His house was suddenly under renovation. Grandfather said nothing. But we all felt it. The system was still alive. Still feeding. Still hungry. Then came the night of my 18th birthday. It wasn't a celebration. It was a warning. He found me in the shed. Stepped in like he owned the place. Stood over me while I sat on the floor with a flashlight and my last granola bar. You're legal now, he said flatly. You don't belong to us anymore. But your silence still does. I didn't respond. He tossed a key onto the floor. Front gates open. Don't come back. He turned and left without another word. And that was it. No hugs. No goodbye. Just exile. Clean and final. But I wasn't empty-handed. Across the city, in lockers and driveways, in USB sticks and notebooks, my story was waiting. Quiet. Patient. I wasn't part of the family anymore. But I wasn't done fighting it either.